Warning, the following podcast has been classified as insanely lucrative. Listener discretion is advised.
As far as impacting organic rank, when you run paid traffic to your listing, there's no...
Your attention, please. Listening to the AM/PM podcast may cause recurring revenue streams and unfair advantages over your competitors. Other side effects may include fatter wallets, fired bosses, and longer vacations. Listen at your own risk. Here's your host, seven-figure entrepreneur and online marketing madman, Manny Coates. Manny Coates.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the AM/PM podcast. My name is Manny Coates, and I will be your host, and this is the show where we discuss how to generate recurring revenue streams that come in 24 hours per day during the AM and the PM, hence the name of the show, AM/PM podcast. As a matter of fact, as soon as I'm finished here, I am going to be watching a marathon, about 3 episodes, short marathon of Game of Thrones. I've been so busy, I have not watched any of them. And guess what? While watching Game of Thrones, I will be making money. How cool is that? Pretty cool, I think. So guys, today I have a special treat for you. I did an interview with Bryan Bowman, and the interview is a little bit long, but it is full of nuggets. If you've ever wanted to know details and instructions, specific things about pay-per-click, okay, how to do things, how to set up your Excel sheet so you can track everything, then this is the episode you want to listen to. It's really cool. We've got a video that Bryan put together that supplements the podcast, right? It's going to go over very specific details and show you exactly what to do. And that video can only be found on our Facebook group, guys. So if you're not a subscriber, if you're not a member of our Facebook group, you need to join that right now. That's on Facebook. It's called the Amazon FBA High Rollers. High rollers like in Vegas, high rollers. So you can find a link to that at the ampmpodcast.com site and just click on the big ugly Facebook graphic or link that we have on the right-hand side banner there on the right column, and you'll be all set. It'll take you there. You need to request to join the group, and Guillermo will get you approved usually within a day, and then you can get in there and check everything out. All right, guys, let's cue up the interview because it's awesome. Hey guys, welcome to another fantastic podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about pay-per-click. That's probably one of the number one questions that we get on our Facebook group is, how do I do pay-per-click? Where do I start? You know, all the questions that go with it. So today, it is my honor, my privilege to introduce Bryan Bowman. He's a pay-per-click expert. So Bryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Manny. It's awesome to be on the show. I'm a fan of the group. I'm a fan of the podcast. So yeah, this is awesome.
Fantastic. Well, before we get into things too deeply here, really important question I want to ask you. If you could make up a national holiday, Bryan, what would it be and how would you be involved?
Let's see. A national holiday. All right. So this might be a little different for your listeners. I don't know if you ask everyone this question, but so I love grappling, the sport of grappling. So I was a wrestler growing up. I compete in jiu-jitsu tournaments now. I love it. It's more than just the fitness part. It's just the competitiveness, what it does for self-confidence, and it's just a lot of fun. It's basically people call it kinetic chess, right? It's like there's a lot of thought that goes into it. So I love jiu-jitsu. I would have National Jiu-Jitsu Day, and people would be rolling out mats onto their front yard, and they'd have local grappling tournaments in their neighborhoods. It would be awesome. It would bring people together, and everyone would get in shape. So it would be awesome.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Jeez, that sounds really, really fun. Okay, so on a serious note, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into this, and tell people why they should be listening to you.
Yeah,
I'm putting you on the spot here.
The heat is on. Okay, exactly. Why should they be listening to me? Well, a little bit about myself in terms of, kind of my background with e-commerce. I've been selling online for about 10 years. my wife and I had started a vintage furniture like resale business quite a while back. And that's when I first started getting exposure to paid traffic, Google AdWords, Facebook traffic, social traffic. And my background outside of sort of e-commerce selling, so it's in math and statistics. I'm technically an actuary. So maybe your audience won't know what an actuary is. Basically, it's somebody who uses a lot of data and analysis to like historical data to figure out what's going to happen in the future and then make the best decisions today. So the point being, as an actuary, you're used to looking at tons of data and looking for trends. So that played really well into advertising and things like that with our other business online. So I was having to look at trends and quickly found that when you were able to find sort of that signal in the noise, you could make good decisions and get a better return on your investment. So yeah, I found out about private labeling on Amazon probably a couple years ago. Didn't really pay much attention to it until it just started coming up more and more, and we figured we'd give it a shot as well. So about a year ago, we started selling, and very quickly I saw the huge opportunity with sponsored products. Basically, it allowed you to get visibility right away. And if you knew how to optimize your campaigns, it could be an awesome vehicle for sales and for market research. So since then, I've been, I am a private label seller, but I've also been working in a consulting role and an account management role for a select group of people for quite a while now. Probably the last 9 months I've been working on that.
Okay, great. So 9 months as a consultant, and how long have you actually been selling on Amazon?
For about a year, probably a little bit over. I mean, we're coming up end of April, so it's, just over a year.
Okay, wow. You got into consulting right away then. So a lot of people need help.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of how it started. I would start making comments in the Facebook groups, just helping out. And then people would approach me with specific questions, hit me up on chat, and then I would help them. They would get good results. And that's kind of how it started, where I thought there would be an opportunity to help more sellers one-on-one.
Okay. All right. Awesome. And if you don't mind me asking, where are you in terms of sales on a monthly basis?
Yeah. So we had our first big month where we hit six figures. So we were able to hit that 100,000 mark. We're pretty consistently at about 70. Now we're moving into the busy season. We have a few new products coming out. We have 6 main products that make up the bulk of our sales. And now we're getting more aggressive with our product launches.
Awesome. Why do you think that pay-per-click, especially on Amazon, is such a difficult thing for most people?
I think the biggest thing is, I think in general, they struggle with the data and analytics part of it. I think the concept makes sense. You have the opportunity to pay for visibility. So that makes sense. But once you get past the initial stage of, all right, I know I need to run ads, let me start running them, the refinement, the optimization, the analysis, that's where people get really hung up because let's face it, it's a lot of data, and how do you know what the next best decision is to make? So I find that the biggest thing that I help my clients with is breaking down the analysis part, because once it's clear to them what's happening, their business side comes in, their ability to say, well, because they know the product better than anyone, so they can start looking at it and saying, oh, these terms are more popular and these types of users are looking for my product. So the creativity and the next steps kind of become more apparent to them, but I think it's the analysis part that people get really hung up on.
Okay. All right. Awesome. And before we start going into each of the steps, because we've got a list of things that I definitely want to go through. There's a lot of acronyms that throw people off, right? You got your ACOS and PPC, click-through rate, that kind of stuff. Did you want to quickly just go over some of those, and then we'll jump right into it? Yeah.
So let's see. So let's start with some of the basic ones. So I think the one that everyone has heard of and probably they throw around, but they're not. I think a lot of people still aren't totally clear on is ACOS. So that's your advertising cost of sale. And it's simply your total spend divided by total product sales. And the big thing to keep in mind is that total product sales is the gross number. I mean, if you're selling a $20 product, if it's listed for $20 and you sell 5 of them, your denominator is 100. And depending on what your spend is, that's the numerator, and that's how you calculate your ACOS. So a lot of people will ask, well, what's the best ACOS, or what's the target ACOS? A good starting point is whatever's your profit margin. So if you sell a $20 product, or you list for $20 and you make, just to use round numbers, $10 on each sale after all your expenses, that's profit after the sale. So you're looking at a 50% profit margin. That's a decent starting point for your target ACoS, because essentially if you make $10 on a sale, then you'd be willing to spend up to $10 to break even. Anything above that, so if you have a 60% ACoS on this product, you're losing money on each sale. Now, that's not always a bad thing. For example, if you want to make a push on a certain keyword so that you can rank more heavily, and we can talk about that later on, it may be wise to run at a loss for a short period of time until you can rank.
Yeah.
And if you could run lower than that profit margin, that's good as well. But anyway, a good break-even ACoS is that profit margin. Some other ones, click-through rate, that's pretty important. That's just how many, so for every impression, how many times are people clicking? So if you have, a 10% click-through rate, you've got a really popular ad. People see it and they're clicking through. If you've got a 0.01% click-through rate, then that's something to look into, because perhaps your image, your title, something is not appealing, or the relevancy of the ad to the customer is not quite lined up. So something is not appealing to them about that particular search term. What are some other terms? Let's see.
Conversion rate would probably be pretty important as well.
Yeah. So basically, just based how many people are converting per click. So people get into the listing. So we talked about the click-through rate. So they see the ad and what percentage of people are actually clicking on the ad. And then once they've clicked, you've got your conversion rate, which is how many people actually go on to make a purchase after they've clicked.
Okay. All right, cool. And we'll probably get into those in more detail as we go. So let's jump back to the basics here, though. Why should somebody actually use Amazon sponsored products, using pay-per-click on Amazon, versus going to Facebook or to Google, some other place outside of Amazon?
I think that there is a time and a place for going outside of Amazon, but if you've just started listing, without question, you need to be focusing on Amazon sponsored products. The biggest reason is, well, first, you're listed in Amazon. It's a shopping platform. That's where the credit cards are stored. That's where, if you focus in Amazon, you're trying to boost your organic rank, and I'll talk about that in a second. But basically, you want to generate as many sales as you can in Amazon when you're first starting out. And if you can use the tools inside of Amazon, I think I think that's the best decision. So number one reason why I would use sponsored products is visibility. You've put in all this hard work. You've picked the perfect product. You've made modifications. You got the right supplier. You got your cost to the right point. You have a great listing, great images, great copy, all that stuff. If people can't find you, they're not going to buy, right? Sponsored products gives you the ability to potentially, from day one or, week one, let's say, appear at the top of the page, appear in front of buyers, because you're going to start on, page 10, 11, 12, and people they're not going to go that deep into search results. So the number one reason is it gives you the opportunity to make sales because people will be able to see you. The next reason, I think, is boosting your organic rank. According to Amazon, I think the way that they phrase it is there's anecdotal evidence that suggests that running sponsored products can increase your organic rank. Well, I have tons of data that basically proves that absolutely, when you run sponsored products on a keyword, let's just say just a main keyword that you really want to rank for organically, those sales, when a customer searches for that keyword, sees your ad, clicks and buys, those sales get credited in the algorithm as stemming from that keyword. So you're going to move up in the rank because it tells the algorithm that when people search for this keyword, they like your product and they buy it. So Amazon is in the business of making money. They're going to put your product in front of buyers.
Okay, so that's a point of debate with a lot of people, right? Is because it seems like it's split. Some people are saying it doesn't rank, pay-per-click will help your sales velocity and other stuff, but it doesn't actually help you rank. And then you have other people that say it does. And I've been of the camp that says, absolutely it does. From what I've seen, it does. And you're now saying you've got tons of data that shows it does. So we can put that to bed, right?
I think so. And I mean, there is some debate as to what is weighted more. And I mean, that you'd have to compare against large data sets to see, is an organic search and purchase, is that weighted more heavily than a search and a paid click and purchase? So that maybe there's a point of contention there, and you could go back and forth and probably look at some data. But as far as impacting organic rank when you run paid traffic to your listing, there's no question about it in my mind, and from the data I've seen.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, if somebody still is doing a search, right? They're doing a search for a blue widget, and then you're happening to bid on that term or that phrase. So Amazon should give you credit for that, because that is what they actually search for, and they're clicking through and buying your product. So it would be weird. It almost make no sense if they didn't rank you for that.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Because in their mind, they're just trying to figure out what sells, right? They just want to make sales and make more money.
Okay, great.
So the other big thing, and I think it gets overlooked because everyone thinks of paid traffic in terms of sales, and the more they spend, if they have a good ACoS, they just want to make more sales. The big thing I think that gets overlooked is the market research opportunity that you have with sponsored products. When you're running exact campaigns, and we'll talk about match types, you're targeting an exact term that people are, or an exact keyword or a phrase that a customer is searching for. But when you run phrase and broad match campaigns, you're getting kind of more information on what the customers are searching for. And what you'll start finding are patterns. This has happened to me with one of my own products, where I thought I knew my client. I thought, my customer, I thought I knew why they would use this product. And I basically ended up finding this whole other secondary market that was buying my product, and it was coming through in the customer search terms. So naturally, I made some changes. I put in some lifestyle photos that catered to that new demographic, or that new category of search that I would have never thought people were using my product for. And then set up separate campaigns to just target that group of keywords, and immediately saw a jump in my organic rank. So again, that's more evidence that targeting the paid traffic for those keywords affects organic rank, because it spiked. It went from, I was at the bottom of page 1, I went to the second spot on the page for the main keyword in this other market. And I would have never known about that had I not paid attention and looked at trends in my search term report and in the data.
So this is from your automatic campaign you're talking about, right? You're looking at the data and seeing what search terms people have actually done to pull up your product? So
auto and manual, and manual for sure. Because if you run under some broad match and using your product as the seed keyword, you'll start finding some patterns that'll emerge in terms of, trying to think of a generic example. I mean, if you have a ball, you sell a ball and you think it's a basketball, well, then you'll find that maybe there's people who will start searching ball for kickball. And you start seeing that pattern, like, wow, a lot of people who play kickball are buying this ball. That's interesting. I would have never thought that. Then you can start running, you can modify your listing a little bit and then start running campaigns on the kickball industry, I guess.
Right. And
I think the one thing also that I think gets overlooked is just the level of sophistication that's going to start coming. Right now, sponsored products it's in its infancy, I would say, compared to something, think Google AdWords. Think of the sophistication that you have there, where you can target, you have geo-targeting, you can do customer match, you can do so much that it gets so granular on who you're targeting. You write your own ad copy. So the idea of an ad group is that for example, if this ball is a basketball and a kickball, I'm going to have ads. So I'm going to have my basketball terms in a basketball ad group, and I'm going to write an ad that's very targeted towards basketball players versus kickball players. Well, that kind of sophistication may be coming. I mean, we definitely know that it's going to get more advanced, and I think that for those who start doing it now, they're going to be comfortable with the platform, and they're going to be able to evolve more quickly and get a competitive edge. As sponsored products gets more and more involved, they're going to be the first ones to react instead of the people who then decide to hop on board and they're scrambling to figure out how the platform works.
Yeah, that makes sense. Right now, I would say it's like what, Google like 7-8 years ago maybe. I mean, we're just now getting broad phrase exact matches, negative keywords. Just things that are real basic.
No doubt. And if you look at what's happening on the AMS side, so Amazon Marketing Services is the PPC platform for vendor accounts. You have a lot more targeting that you can do, and there's a lot more features that are out there that are not available in sponsored products. So you actually can write. So your users may have seen the headline ads. So when you do a search and when you do an organic search, above the first sponsored products ad, on top you'll see a banner, a headline banner. Well, that's AMS, and you can actually customize the copy for AMS ads. So you can create very highly targeted ads, and you can even target when they click the ad, what do they see? They could see a custom listing page with certain SKUs. There's a lot of customization you can do, and it's natural to think that that's probably coming. I mean, there's none of us know for sure, but I think it's safe to say that sponsored products as it stands will evolve for sure.
Yeah, I can't wait. And there's a lot of stuff that people aren't using. I'll see stuff and that pop up on my other competitors' products are popping up actually on my product listing page, and I'm like, what is that?
Yeah.
And then you go and research it and figure out how to do it, right?
That's exactly right.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit further now. What do you think people should do before jumping into the whole PPC thing?
That's a great question, Manny. I think everyone gets so excited. They hear, I need to be running sponsored products. They get all jazzed about it. They run it, and it kind of falls flat. And they go, what the heck? Sponsored product doesn't work. What's all the hype about, right? Mm-hmm. So there are a few things I think that you want to check off the checkbox before you get started. One, make sure you've built a listing that is going to generate clicks and is going to convert. There's a few things to touch on. So one, your title. This is all basic stuff that I think people take for granted, but make sure you have a title that explains what you're selling, is optimized for keywords that your target audience is going to be searching for. Your images, make sure you have high quality images. Have lifestyle photos. I think, one thing you hear over and over from successful sellers. In fact, you just had Kevin King on the podcast, and he may have talked about this. I know it's something he believes in. I believe in. All the successful sellers that I've talked to have lifestyle photos. That's people shop with their emotions, and seeing the product in action, it taps into that emotional side. So have good images, high quality, ones that can zoom in. Have a competitive price, and that doesn't mean the lowest price. It just means a price that is in line with the perceived value of your product. Mm-hmm. So you can have a high price. There's nothing wrong with that. You can go premium, but make sure you've got a premium listing, a premium product, premium photos, so that people know clearly, yeah, it's priced more, but I'm getting a better product. So a competitive price, optimized listing. A lot of people ask about reviews. The strategy that I'm going to talk about today, you can absolutely start your campaigns without reviews, but to really start making sales, you are going to need some reviews. It doesn't have to be a lot, but there does have to be, people always talk about that social proof. That definitely has to be there. Nobody wants to be the one to leave the first review. And again, you don't need many. I mean, we're talking 5 to 10. And what I'm going to propose is a strategy where you can run pay-per-click right from the gate, collect very valuable information. And in that time, that 5 to 7 days where your campaign is running, you can go ahead and collect some reviews, and you'll be good to go to start scaling. In addition to the title, make sure your back-end search terms are optimized as well. And I mean, we could have a whole separate conversation about, the best way to optimize and which fields should have which words, but whatever you do, make sure you do some work on those back-end terms, because it's just like organic search, your paid impressions are going to be highly dependent on your relevancy. So it's really important that that's set up, or you're going to have a heck of a time having your ads appear in search.
Right. Okay. I know you said we could talk, have a whole different separate conversation on title and back-end terms. I'd actually probably like to have you come back. Maybe we can do a part 2, and we'll actually talk about some of the more advanced stuff. How's that sound?
That sounds awesome. I do tons and tons of testing on this stuff. And yeah, some interesting patterns emerge, and some interesting troubleshooting, comes up that you have to take care of. It's crazy, but I will say those back end terms, if you can get them dialed in, I mean, I think you've written about it quite extensively. it can be a real a boon for sales. I mean, you could have massive increases in sales if you get those back end terms right.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we'll definitely dive into that on a different episode. I do want to kind of jump back a little bit, though. You were talking about the images and using lifestyle images, and I just wanted to emphasize to listeners that it's critical. I mean, absolutely critical that the images look fantastic because, Bryan, no matter what you do, right? If the pay-per-click is is perfect, but the image that's showing on those ads is garbage, you've kind of hosed yourself before you even start.
Yeah, exactly right. And it goes back to what we were talking about with with click-through rate, but more so with conversion rates. A lot of our decisions in pay-per-click are going to be based on those conversion rates. So, you may have a great keyword that you're targeting and you're like, man, this is relevant to my product. I really should be selling, but the data is telling me I should dump this keyword. Let's go ahead and get rid of the variable of, well, maybe you just have a garbage image and compared to your competition, it's just not worth it to them. So they bounce from your listing and go to the next one. If you take care of all those things first, you can isolate all these other variables and it'll make your pay-per-click data that much more valuable and reliable. So 100% get all that stuff taken care of, have your just spot on listing. And as far as cost, I do want to mention this because I feel like a lot of people say, oh man, but $50 for an image or, hiring out to do a lifestyle photo, that could be a few $100s. This is a business and just really make sure, you understand that there's an upfront investment, but the payout is massive if you can get all those details right, because it's all those little things that add up that separate you from the competition. So
yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about match types, because that's probably the thing that really confuses people. I know it was something that confused some of my friends that I got into Amazon. I knew about it because I worked with AdWords before, but let's talk about the different types that there are.
Perfect. So I think I'll talk. So you have basically broad, phrase, exact, and then you've got your negative, exact, negative phrase. So let's talk about broad match. If you run an auto campaign, that is by default is a broad match. And I'm going to use, sleeping bag. Let's use sleeping bag as the example, keyword.
Hey, Bryan, real quick, before you get into that though, just so that if there's brand new listeners, just a quick difference between auto and manual. I know it sounds real intuitive, but can you quickly just talk about that?
Oh yeah, for sure. So in auto campaign, you will choose the product that you want to run the auto campaign on, or the SKU, or numerous SKUs, but Amazon will basically, based on what it believes your product is, so based on the relevance, let me back up. It will auto target your product and it'll pair it up with customer searches. So it will basically, when customers search, it will decide if your product is relevant or not and put it in front of them. So it's going to auto target customer searches and keywords. Now, we'll talk about this later on. It's not going to show you the keywords in the reporting, but it will show you the customer search terms, which is the actual term that the customer typed in. And that's really the valuable data. But yeah, basically, Amazon does the work for you. I mean, you pick the product and Amazon goes to work. You give it a bid that you want it to use, and then Amazon goes to work and starts putting your ad in front of people it believes are searching for your product based on the relevancy that it's figured out. And that's actually, we're going to actually run an auto campaign first to figure out that exact thing. What the heck does Amazon think I'm selling? Which sounds like an obvious question, but the answer can be wildly different than what you're actually selling. So
yeah,
manual campaign. Oh, sorry, you were gonna say something?
No, I was gonna say absolutely, and that's the easy one, right? You get in there, you just throw in a bid amount, and you're off to the races. You're good to go. Manual starts getting a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, manual is a little more complicated, a little more fun. I mean, depending on how you how you see it, but that's where you actually get to do the targeting and a little more research. And basically, you're going to input you're going to provide the keywords, and based on the match type, your ad will appear for different customer searches depending on on the match type that you've selected for each keyword.
Okay. Okay, cool. So now we can jump into the actual match types. You were mentioning broad, phrase, and exact, and negatives.
Yeah. So let's, I think we'll use sleeping bag as an example. So let's talk about broad match. What broad match means is if you take, so in that manual campaign, because you won't be able to select the keywords you want in auto. Again, Amazon does that, and their algorithm figures out what keywords to use. In manual, you can start an ad group and use, let's say the ad group's going to have all broad match. So if you use a broad match keyword sleeping bag, what that's saying is when a customer searches, so they go into Amazon in the search bar and they type sleeping bag, your ad is eligible to appear. If they type a word before or after sleeping bag, so best sleeping bag for camping, again, your ad is eligible to appear. If they flip-flop the words, bag for sleeping outdoors, your ad is eligible to appear. So again, it just means that sleeping and bag have to be in the customer search, the actual search that the customer goes into Amazon when they're looking for something.
So the order doesn't matter at that point. You can just
doesn't matter.
As long as they're both there. Okay, got it.
As long as they're there, exactly. Phrase is a little bit more refined, a little bit more targeted, but not quite as targeted as exact. So phrase just means that sleeping and bag have to stay together, but you can put anything before and after, again, based on relevancy, but anything before and after. So best sleeping bag for camping, those are eligible to appear also under phrase match, but bag for sleeping outdoors is not, because you've flip-flopped the order of bag and sleeping. So sleeping bag has to stay as a phrase. Anything before or after, your ad is potentially eligible to appear.
Okay.
Exact is exact. It not only is, it has to be, the phrase has to stay intact, but no additional words before and after the phrase will be included. So it will account for plurals and some filler words. So, for the will, and those will be included, but generally just think, it's your ad will appear for that exact term or plural.
Okay, that's good to know. So exact matches just by default are going to have the least amount of actual impressions and clicks because people have to type in exactly that phrase.
Yep, that's exactly right. I feel like we're saying exact a lot.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's spot on. So exactly, you have to type that phrase. Now, what if you can imagine, each one of these serves a very different purpose. So broad is definitely more of a research tool, right? Because if you put sleeping bag, there are so many combinations that you could appear for. It's also the reason why broad, you generally want to use a lower bid, because if you put, some $5 bid on broad, just think of, just how many different, terms you could show up for. While if you are in a heavy research phase, maybe that is a strategic approach, but you better be ready to spend some money because you are going to get a lot of clicks on a high bid on broad.
Okay.
And then, and you generally what you're trying to do is funnel your terms down each match type. There are a lot of different strategies, but a very basic strategy is start broad, identify terms that are converting, customer search terms, not keywords, customer search terms. There's a difference there. If the keyword is sleeping bag, the customer search term can be a variety of things. What the customer actually was looking for under that broad match. And then you may test it further under a phrase. And once you find that it's converting really well, you can target it very specifically under an exact match. And again, that's a very general sort of framework, but it's one that can be effective.
Okay, great. And then we had negatives. That's one that really confuses people.
Yeah, it does. And I think you have to be really careful with negatives. They can be very powerful for reducing your advertising cost of sale or ACoS. But again, you have to be really careful with them. And I'll show you, I'll have some more information on how to really analyze this to make sure you're picking the right ones. But basically, negative exact means your ad is not eligible to appear. And the same way that exact for our sleeping bag example was your ad could appear for sleeping bag or sleeping bags. If you do a negative exact on sleeping bag, your ad is not eligible to appear for sleeping bag, sleeping bags. Where that is very powerful is if you think of ACoS as your spend over your sales, the way to reduce ACoS, you basically have two ways or three, but let's say the simplest way is two ways. You can reduce the numerator so you can spend less, or you can increase your denominator or make more sales with the same amount of spend. Ideally, we can we reduce spend and increase sales, so we can really bring our ACoS down. But what negatives allow you to get at is that numerator part. It's stuff that is not converting. It's never going to convert. And we just don't want to appear. We don't want our ads to appear anymore because people keep clicking it and aren't buying. So let me make this disappear, basically.
That makes sense. So, for example, if I'm selling coffee filters and I've got the term filters is one of my keywords, and I start noticing that people are looking for air conditioning filters, and that's just taking up a lot of the, or I'm getting clicks but nobody's buying, then I would add those in as negatives.
Exactly.
As exact phrase. Or I can actually put just, for example, if it was a air conditioning filter, I could just put air conditioning or air conditioner as a negative phrase.
Yeah. So I always recommend, I'm really cautious with phrase, but you're absolutely right. I mean, you can definitely, the same way that, exact is very targeted, phrase is a little bit of a broader, it's a broader, I shouldn't say broader match type. It casts a little bit of a wider net, and you can basically knock out a whole bunch of exacts with just one negative phrase, right?
By accident. So it's better. Would you say it's better then for people that are starting out to only use exact negatives?
Yeah, just until you get comfortable with, I don't know, just with the reports and the terms, until you have some degree of, I don't know, some little bit of experience with it, I would definitely do negative exact. And even with negative exact, I would be very selective. Kind of general criteria, depending on how risky you are, how much risk you want to take, or how patient you are. I generally use the rule of if something has no sales and has, in general, let's say over 20 clicks, then it's definitely a negative exact. Sometimes I may go as low as 10 or more clicks and just negative exact it because I just don't want to waste my time with it. When I have terms that are getting, 10 and 15, 20% conversion rates, why spend any more money on this stuff just to research it? There's some unique situations where we can get into more detail. Maybe on the second podcast, I would consider it more advanced on when exactly you should be negative exacting a term. But in general, if it's getting a bunch of clicks, no sales, it's a good candidate for negative exact. Well, just one thing I want to say with negative phrase is what you're generally looking for though are those patterns. If you see a group of terms that are all negative exacts, and this is what you were getting at, are all potential negative exacts, but you see that it's the same theme repeated, then you may have a great candidate for a negative phrase. And like you said, you just won't appear, if you put air conditioner, then no matter what they, search, best air conditioner for something, your ads will never appear. So it can be a great way to just reduce ACoS real quickly, but if not used correctly, it could also reduce sales. So.
Yeah. I've got a lot of questions relative to negative keywords, but I think they're more advanced, and in terms of timing and things like that. So we'll do that in the next one. But let's go back to some of the basics. So people know the basics on how to get going. I think the next biggest question that people have is, well, how much should I bid, and how much should my daily budget be? Can you kind of go over that?
Absolutely, and I this is a question that comes up all the time. And this might sound familiar with your users, or maybe you've come across this, Manny, but a question I hear all the time. I have a $20 budget on this campaign, and it's charged me $30 today. What the heck? What gives? And it's because of the way that Amazon is in the way they interpret daily budget. They're seeing it as the average amount you're willing to spend each day in a calendar month. So what that means is, let's use that $20 budget example. If it's the first of the month and you put $20 as your budget and you spend $10 today, tomorrow on day 2, you've told Amazon, I'm willing to spend $20 per day. So you can spend in a 2-day period, $40 minus the 10 you spent yesterday, you could potentially spend $30 on day 2, even though your daily budget is $20.
That's interesting. Okay.
And that keeps adding up throughout the month. So what could potentially happen is, and it resets every calendar month. So what could potentially happen is if you had, so let's say a 30-day month, so 20 times 30 is 600. If you spent $1 each day and you never changed that budget, so you started on day 1, you spent $1 each day, by the 29th day, you've spent $29. And if there was just some wild spike in clicks on the 30th day, you could spend theoretically 600 minus 29. So what, $571? $571?
Yeah.
So you could technically spend $571 that last day. Now, I've never seen that happen, but in theory, that could happen.
Wow, that would give somebody a heart attack, right?
Yeah, like, what the heck?
Well, hopefully, if that happens, that means that their sales have just blown up, so that's good.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully, it's a really good thing, and yeah, maybe you're like that. I would like to know what you did on the 29th, like because I have campaigns that, man, if I could 1,000x my impressions, that would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be crazy. I just posted a video in the Facebook group over at FBA High Rollers, which kind of showed my initial climb. I don't know if you got a chance to see it, but it started off really small, $18, $21, $25 or something like that, and then it goes to $40, $90, and then $80 something, and then it jumps from there. Like the next day, I wasn't expecting it was like $300 and something, because I thought it'd be like $90, and then I'm like, whoa, $300, and then the next day it was like $500, and so I started to worry. I'm like, this is going to go out of control, So, and you're right, it did actually exceed some of the budgets to an extent, not by a lot, but I got nervous. But then I looked at my sales, and we'll probably get into this, but the sales are kind of trailing your ad spend. So it's like, man, I spent $500, but I only made $600 in sales. And it's not until like a couple days later that it's all kicking in. Yeah,
and a couple days later, and also make sure you, if you really want to track that, make sure you track what happens 30 days later. In your campaign performance report, and again, this probably is a little more advanced than what we're talking about today, but you'll notice every product has sort of an average number of additional sales that get made from that click, and you'll be surprised how high it can be. I mean, it can be as high as 30 days out from the initial click, your sales on average may go up 20%. So you can look at data from last week and look at that same data a month later, and your ACoS may have dropped pretty significantly.
So when you're looking at your ACoS, let's say a month later, and you get a sale from a click that was a month earlier, does that get calculated into that ACoS that you're seeing on that specific day, today when I'm looking at the report, or not?
Today when you're looking at I see, like later on. Yeah, because if you notice in the campaign performance, you've got 3 columns. You've got a day out, a week out, and 30 days out.
I know on the reports, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. So on the reports for sure, and that's what you were mentioning people should download. But you know how you can go into, when you go into your advertising, and you can select today or last week or whatever. If you're selecting like yesterday, and I'm looking at the ACoS numbers from yesterday, not on a downloadable report, but on the actual website, will it show those sales? Do you know if it shows those sales from like a month earlier, or is it only specifically taking into account the data from yesterday?
It's yesterday's data.
Okay, so you really do need the reports then.
Yeah, you should be making decisions. Yeah, I would definitely not be making decisions on sort of killing keywords and bid decisions from inside of Campaign Manager. Okay. There's just so many other insights you can get that are not only more accurate but more granular in the reports for sure.
Great. All right, so where were we? We were talking about...
we're talking about the budget.
Yes, that's right. Okay.
So one way to get around this, because I know a lot of people say, hey, I spent $10, good for me. I don't want to spend $30 tomorrow. I want it to be, I want to have everything sort of fixed. I don't want any of these wild spikes. They want to have sort of more control. They can do an account daily cap. So under your campaign settings, right from that Campaign Manager tab, or when you click Campaign Manager and you're on the main screen, there's an account settings tab, and there you can select the account daily cap as opposed to campaign level budgets. And basically what that means is you've set a cap for the day. So regardless of where the spend happens throughout your different campaigns, it caps out at a dollar amount. So if you put a $20 cap, that's the most you can spend. If you don't hit the cap, that's fine. But the next day, the cap is still 20 if that's what you set it at.
Okay. All right. And that doesn't affect each campaign individual. They'll run normally until that daily cap is hit, and then everything just kind of pauses, right?
Exactly. It says account out of, so instead of campaign out of budget, it will just say account is out of budget. Now, this is not something, I think maybe when you're starting out, maybe it's a little bit of a safety net that I would recommend sellers use. Later on, you definitely, if you have campaigns that are running at a really good ACoS, you want to let those run and you want to throw more money at them and let them keep running because they're performing well and making you money. The other time that I recommend using an account daily cap is when you get very sort of experimental and you're trying a lot of testing. Then at that point, you definitely want to put that in because, for example, in your situation, I think you said you just had that spike in spend. You were not expecting it. Maybe it was okay. You allocate a certain amount of money for testing, so that's fine. But for somebody who has a limited budget and they start trying some of these advanced techniques and start testing, the last thing you want is to be shocked with a $300 bill that you weren't expecting.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that does it for budgets. They're not. I think at first it's one of those things that's a little complicated, but once you get used to it and you understand how it gets. How it's defined with Amazon, it starts making a lot more sense. So the bids is probably the other thing that people get a little tripped up on, especially when they're starting out, because there's a bid amount. So there's two things. First of all, there's an estimated page one bid, and that sounds clear enough, right? It's the estimate. Amazon's telling you it's the estimated page one bid. That should be really accurate.
You would think.
Yeah. It's basically worthless. There's a lot of reasons why. I know it's outdated information, and essentially that is not, I know some people who it works for their product. They have a strategy that kind of starts at the estimated page one and then moves up a certain percentage above that. But for most sellers, I wouldn't really pay attention to that. I generally use the technique of going with a higher bid and working your way down, particularly with keywords that I absolutely know I want to target. When I'm doing more of the broad match stuff, I will start low and work my way up because I have a different purpose for those. So for example, we can talk about this in a little bit about kind of targeting long tail keywords versus those high volume, money keywords or just, high search keywords. Long tails are lower cost per click, closer to the point of purchase, higher conversion rates. There aren't as many of them, but if you can get a whole grouping of them, they can make an impact. But generally, I start with high bids and work my way down. And that's basically so that my ads can appear. If I start too low, I'm not getting click-throughs, I'm not getting impressions. It's just, you don't get any traction at all. So I like to start high, work my way down. The way the bids work in general is, the auction system, it's called a second price auction. So you will only pay, it's what that bid is that you put in, it's the maximum you're willing to pay. It's not what you're going to pay. So you only get charged when your ad gets clicked. That's where the pay per click part of the whole thing comes into play. And the next lowest bid, you're just going to pay above that. So if you put a $5 bid and the next lowest bid is, $1, then you'll pay just enough to beat that dollar. Now, what it is exactly, a lot of people ask, am I paying a penny more? Is it 5 cents more? That's really, it's not documented anywhere. And that's kind of, unless we know what the next highest bid is, we don't know for sure, but we do know that it's just enough to beat out that next bid.
Okay. And then if you have multiple campaigns, could you technically be bidding against yourself?
Another one of the most popular questions I think that everyone, and I totally get why this would be a common question because I don't want to, if I'm bidding $1 and $1.50, have I just upped the bid? Have I just set a new floor for that bid of $1 and now I'm going to have to pay $1.05 or whatever? No, that's not how it works. I've tested this. You absolutely do not bid against yourself. Impressions will first filter to the highest bid, and that's the only place where you're going to see the impressions, and you're not going to upbid yourself by having the same keyword somewhere else in an ad group or a campaign.
Okay. All right, that's good. And you had mentioned long-tail keywords. For those that might not know what that is, you want to describe that real quickly?
Yeah. So long tails have always they're kind of like the holy grail of pay-per-click advertising, because they're everything you want. They have a low search volume because, well, first of all, they're closer to the point of purchase. So if you take, let's say, red shoes as an example, red shoes, that search term has tons of search volume. A lot of people are looking for red shoes. It's very competitive, high cost per click. Yes, it makes more sales because there's more volume, but you're paying more for that as well. As you start adding terms to the search, so red shoes for, for running. Okay, now we're not just talking about red shoes. They could be high heels, they could be dress shoes, sports shoes, whatever. We're getting closer now to the point of purchase. It's more specific. So now it's for running. Okay, the search volume goes down, the cost per click goes down as you get longer in the tail. So it's just a distribution. I mean, if I'll have an illustration that I'll put together for the listeners that'll kind of talk about this, and I'll walk through kind of how this works. But it's basically a distribution. So there's less people searching as the term gets longer. So red shoes for running a marathon. You're very close now. This is a very specific search. Someone is looking for a very specific product. And if you have a red shoe that is clearly for running marathons, you've got a pretty high chance now of converting for a few reasons. Mainly, the competition has really thinned out, so you're not competing against everyone selling a red shoe and trying to be visible. That you're closer to the point of purchase. You've catered to that customer. Hopefully, you have a great listing that really clearly conveys this. So you're paying less for that click, and your conversion rate is really high on it. So that's kind of like the holy grail. It's what everyone's looking for. And if you can imagine, if you could have 10, 20, 30 of these long tail keywords that you can dominate both as an advertiser and in organic rank, it can be a really a good boost for sales. So yeah. Is that clear? Sorry, I kind of
that was perfect. I mean, I don't think anybody will not know what a long tail keyword is at this point. So that's
sorry,
great.
Yeah.
No, and I guess to take it one step further, maybe it's a little bit more advanced, but I would consider it kind of like the basics of setting up your account. Once you know that there's at least some kind of search volume for that long tail keyword, you want to make sure all of those words are peppered throughout your account somewhere, right? So that Amazon does actually see your product as relevant for that, so that you do start getting those pay-per-click impressions as well as organic, right? You eventually you're hoping to land on page one organically where you don't have to pay for that click.
Exactly. We'll end up doing is once we rank organically and we're above the fold, so the midpoint of the page. I still like to run advertising afterwards. I still want to remind the buyer that I'm there. So if they do check out page 2, I want to make sure my ad's appearing somewhere, or maybe at the bottom of page 1 if I was towards the top. I just like to have that market presence in my with my ads. But absolutely, okay. It's those long tail searches. They're closer to the point of purchase. There's less competition, and you'll see it when you search in Amazon, right? You do red shoes, and there's 30,000 results. When you type, red shoes for running a marathon, whatever we had said, you might be down to 60 results. Right. And you've thinned out the competition. So exactly like you said, it's not just for paid traffic. You want to make sure that stuff's in your listing so that it's relevant to the buyer and you get those conversions.
Okay, perfect. So let's go back to bids, because I can't tell you how many times people have posted on our Facebook group where they say, man, I've got a $10 bid on a phrase and I just don't get shown no matter what. It's not only about the bid amount, right?
No, it's not. And you can imagine why Amazon would do that. I mean, they want to make sure that, relevant stuff gets put in front of the customer, right? So if, you can't just bid on any keyword and just put a high bid and say, oh, like why, I just want my product to be to appear for every keyword. I mean, Amazon has certain things in place, other factors that get used to determine not only whether you're going to appear, but how much you'll pay. So if I think some of the ones that maybe people don't know, I mean, relevance seems logical, right? I mean, we want to make sure that customers are seeing, well, Amazon wants to make sure customers are seeing relevant products, but they're also looking at the length of the campaign, so how long the campaign has been around for. And within that campaign length, they're looking at certain metrics. So the click-through rate, we mentioned that earlier, that we'll call it CTR. They're looking at, how many clicks it's getting. And now they've recently started looking at historical sales. So basically, if campaigns that have, the rich get richer kind of thing, the campaigns that are getting the search, that are getting the clicks, they're getting the sales volume, they're going to have priority for impressions.
It's good to know. So yeah, it's important to make sure your account is set up as perfectly as possible so that you have the highest chance of success initially, because that's all going to affect you long term.
Absolutely. And in fact, one thing we've started doing when we test, we may form some ad groups. And again, you have to do this very carefully because you don't want to skew the data in those good campaigns. But a lot of times I'll do some of the testing in those really good campaigns. So I'll have some ad groups in there because there's already that age. There's always that aged campaign. So I'll try to leverage that with my testing, if that makes sense.
Okay. So if you have an aged campaign, is it beneficial then to go in and create a new ad group for something versus, if possible, versus creating another one?
Exactly. I have found that. So there's always this, I don't know, this kind of dead period whenever you start a new campaign, even if it's very relevant, and eventually you'll get the impressions. There's always a learning period where you just don't get a lot of traction at first with that campaign, and the ACoS is generally pretty high. And then within, it all depends, but let's say a week, you'll start seeing that impression start coming in, you start getting clicks, and usually a few weeks out, the ACoS starts to normalize a little bit. But what I have found is when I form those testing ad groups in some of those already successful campaigns, I cut down on that learning period, and right away I can start getting impressions.
Okay, well, I'm going to put this for our advanced stuff because I think that's good stuff. Using aged accounts and just kind of jumping around and getting through some of the hoops here. Okay, so let's talk about setting up an actual campaign, the structure of doing it.
Yeah, there's no, I get this question a lot, and there's no right answer. There's no correct way to set up a campaign. The only thing it has to have a structure, and I like to talk about it in terms of themes. Make sure each campaign has a theme. I can't tell you how many times I have either consulted someone or taken on a client, and how do I put this? They might be listening. Let's see. No, I'm just kidding. It's just a mess. And I get it when you're first starting out, you call it, first campaign trial, test one, inspired words from book. I don't know, there are just some crazy names that I see. Very quickly that turns into a problem because one, you're going to have a hard time scaling. You're going to have a hard time analyzing it. When you start looking at the data and you're trying to see wait, what campaign did this come from? And also just throwing all kinds of random products into the same ad group. And if there's no structure, it just makes it very difficult to analyze, very difficult to scale. So have a consistent structure and just kind of stick to it. So one that I like to recommend is 3 basic campaigns. And I use campaigns to control my budgets, right? Because that's where I put my daily budget. So I have an auto campaign, and what I like to have a consistent naming convention. So I'll have, for the auto, it'll say auto hyphen product one, whatever product one is. So basketball. Then I'll have a testing campaign. Testing, so the name will be testing hyphen basketball. And then maybe let's call it the winning keywords campaign, where these are the words that I've funneled through, and it's a campaign where I can throw as much money as I want at it because it has a good ACoS, and I want it to just basically, the more I can spend, the better, because I'm making, I'm giving it $1 and getting $1.10 back or whatever. And again, winning keywords, the name, winning keywords hyphen product one, so basketball again. Like I said, you can control budget. So if I want to only allocate, if I have, $100 every day to spend, and I only want to allocate, $20 to auto, then I can do that at the campaign level. But if I want to allocate, 30 to testing and the other 50 to the winning keywords, then I can do that because I've themed everything. But as soon as you start mixing and matching, let's say I've got all of those winning keywords in an ad group. After all that research, I've funneled them down and I've got them in that testing campaign, but I'm testing in that campaign, right? So I've got a bunch of stuff that wastes money initially. That campaign's going to run out of budget, and the words that do really well, they're not going to be eligible to appear. So if you've got you can imagine you can have this campaign that overall has a really bad ACoS, but if there's a part of it that does really well, I want to allocate my budget separately to that.
Okay, so is that the reason then why, for example, if you have an auto campaign and you got some keywords in there that are just doing awesome, and you talked about having a campaign called Winning Keywords, product number one, you're pulling those winning keywords out of there to separate it from the other one so that it doesn't get affected negatively by the other performers?
I just want to target them specifically. So yeah, exactly. If they're doing well, I just want to make sure that I've got plenty of money to spend on those. I'm thinking more in terms of like not having the, in my testing campaign, I want to separate them out because I don't want that whole campaign to go out of budget and not be able to spend money on the good stuff. On the auto campaign, I let that run because I'll typically run the auto campaign with a lower budget. I think of the auto campaign as my long tail search machine. Mm-hmm. So I'm pretty aggressive with negative exacts on the auto because I want to basically trim down all the waste in that campaign. I have a lower budget and I just want that thing just running. I basically want Amazon working for me all day, finding long tail terms.
Okay. So let's say that, for example, basketball, there's an exact phrase, basketball for girls. And that one is just crushing it for you, right? You're doing well. And that's in your auto. And you pull that out and you put it into your winning keywords campaign. Would you add then a negative keyword for that particular phrase in your auto?
If the bids are the same, then yeah. But typically I'll have a higher bid on that because I'm trying to target it more specifically. So the impression's going to go to the higher bid.
Okay, so it automatically goes there because you're bidding. Even if you bid 1 cent more, it'll the preference will go over to the one that's paying more then.
Yeah, and I mean with negatives, with autos, I do get a little more aggressive with negatives. I used to use that technique of as I moved keywords down the funnel, I would negative exact in the previous campaign, but I stopped doing that mainly because it's not necessary. Again, because of how impressions get prioritized based on the bid, and it can get pretty messy too. If you can imagine every time you funnel words through, you negative them somewhere else, and then if you lose track of that, I mean, you have to be very organized to do that. And again, I don't see the use in it.
So let me ask you this. And earlier we had mentioned that the historical sales and the click-through rate, things like that, have a factor on whether your ad is shown or not. So you're bidding a higher amount on the manual campaign now. So that should be the campaign that shows that particular phrase because you're bidding more there. But if the historical data on the automatic is better and the click-through is better on that keyword in the automatic, even though it's a lower bid, could Amazon say, well, you know what, it's a lower bid in this campaign because you didn't negative the keyword out. You said you didn't do that anymore. Could it potentially show that one over the other one?
That's interesting. I haven't really tested that, but that's a really good observation. Let me think if I can think of a case.
I would think not because it's your own accounts, but
yeah, I'm almost sure. I mean, my knee-jerk reaction is no. It won't appear, but you'll find out. You'll find the more we talk about this stuff, you'll see I'm very like data driven. I like to make sure when I give answers, I can back them up.
Yeah. It could bite you. I can see a scenario where it could hurt you potentially, which is, again, if you have a competitor out there and you're going head to head with them and half the time they're getting the impressions, half the time you are, let's say, and you're like, man, this is my best keyword phrase, and you move that into a manual campaign, at that point, because you've lost your historical data, you've lost all the data that Amazon has on the other one, because the other one, let's say had 6 months worth of data, it might take a little while for Amazon to say, well, we want to start showing this keyword phrase against the competitors, because we just talked about potentially losing everything when you create a new one, right?
Yeah, no, and that absolutely can happen. Yeah, I don't know. I know that if it's a broad match, also, I know that the auto broad sort of has precedence over the manual broad in terms of impressions, but yeah, I don't have anything that I can think of that would like conclusive data showing like that could explain what would happen in the case that you're talking about.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll move on.
Good stuff, though. I mean, it's definitely something worth looking into. I mean, digging around in the data a little bit, you could probably find examples.
Right. Okay. So, and you had mentioned you were going to provide an illustration of this because it does get kind of complicated when we're talking about it on a podcast versus someone actually being able to see it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm going to have, I'm actually going to put a video together explaining some of the analysis part that we'll talk about later on. And I'll provide that for the group members. And I'll have a chart that they can look at.
Awesome, guys. Yeah. So we'll post that video into our Facebook group. If you're listening to the podcast and you're not part of the Facebook group, definitely join. It's called the Amazon FBA High Rollers, and you can join that by going to ampmpodcast.com and clicking on the Facebook graphic on the right-hand side. So where were we? And I appreciate you putting the video together. That's really awesome. I think that will have tremendous value for the listeners.
But hold on a second. Hold on. Does that mean that I'm an FBA high roller since I'm talking to the high roller himself?
I think so, yeah. And I don't know if I'm a high roller. Come on now. I'm still trying to become a high roller. I guess it's all relative, right?
I don't know. I've seen some of those screenshots, Manny. You're a high roller in my book.
Oh well, thank you. Again, it's all relative. So cool.
Yeah, I'm sure there's someone who's like, oh, peanuts.
I know I want to meet that guy and then be like, I want to do what you do.
Yeah, let's hang out.
Yeah, those are my daily numbers. So perfect. All right, so we've got the campaign structure going. Where were we on that?
Ad groups. I like to talk about this, just kind of still continuing with the theme, like the structure of your campaigns and the theme idea is just to make sure you clearly label your ad groups. Okay. Because a lot of times, so I like to keep match types in certain ad groups. I really don't like mixing and matching. I like to keep everything by match type. So if I have exact matches that I'm testing, I like to keep all of my exact matches in the ad group. Same thing with phrase and broad. Again, it just makes it easier to analyze the data, makes it easier to see trends at a high level instead of having to go in and just figure out, where's that keyword. And there's a way, I should say this, there is a way, and I could, it's the estimated page 1 bid report, and that'll give you a whole printout of where all your keywords are. Because a lot of times people will have these huge campaigns, huge structures with all these campaigns, all these ad groups are like, I've got this keyword basketball, but I know it's in like 7 different places. I don't know where to find it. And they're trying to figure out which one has the highest bid and all that. If you print out the estimated page 1 bid, it'll show you all the different ad groups and campaigns that have the keyword and what you're bidding at the time.
Okay.
But anyway, I like to keep the same structure. So for example, if I'm doing testing -basketball campaign, under there I might have exact match ad group. So it'll be called exact match. And then in parentheses or another hyphen, I might say, the source. So if I used Google Keyword Planner, then it's, the name of the ad group will be exact match -Google Keyword Planner. Again, it's just so I can keep everything organized. It's easier to scale and to analyze. But yeah, I think that's about it in terms of how to structure a campaign. Again, I'll provide an illustration to explain all this. So if you're driving right now and you're like, wait, what? There'll be a picture and it'll be way easier to understand.
Okay, cool. So with the structure in place, you know what you're going to do. Somebody's going to set up the first campaign. They start with an auto campaign. We talked about that earlier. That's the easiest way. And you're going to run that. How long would you run that for before you start pulling things out and creating manual campaigns?
Yeah. So you're gonna end up running the auto indefinitely. But at first, you're going to want to run it at a bit of a higher bid. And you want to do that for, about 5 days. We call it validating the listing. And basically, the reason you use a high bid, because people ask me, they'll say, how much should I bid? $1? I say, no, bid $3, and they go, wow, that's pretty high. And I might tell them to have a $10 or $15 budget. But the reason is I don't want to put a ceiling on the terms that Amazon can show for my listing. So I want to see, basically, if I put a high bid, I'm giving free rein to Amazon to say, listen, show my ad to everything you think is relevant to my product, because I want to basically read Amazon's mind a little bit. And I want to see what are they looking at. So for 3 to 5 days, let's say, run a $3 bid on a, I don't know, $10 to $15 budget. The specifics really don't matter. It's just later when you pull that data. So after, let's say you run it 5 days, give it 3 days for all the data to come in. So, 8 days after you start, you can run a report. You're going to want to see by just sorting impressions. And again, I'll have a video that talks all about this. So just, listen to the idea and I'll walk you through the specifics. But you're just going to see by sorting the impressions from largest to smallest, what is the terms that Amazon is putting my product in front of the most. And that gives me an idea, hey, if we're talking the basketball still and it's, basketball, ball for sports, I don't know, just